Today we're going to begin a new unit, and this unit is on piecewise functions and inverse functions. So we're going to be doing a lot of new material in this first part because you've never studied piecewise functions before. A piecewise function is broken down into many equations, and each equation graphs a piece of the graph. For example, in this lesson, for this example we have here, f of x, there's 1/2 x plus 3 when x is greater than 2. X is greater than 2 is the domain. And this 1/2 x plus 3 is my expression that I'm graphing. And you can see over here that at x is 2, it graphs this straight line for a piece. But then our second problem reflected and moved 1 to the right and 5 up for the vertex here on my quadratic, but it only graphs the quadratic up to 2 for the domain, 2 and less. And so it only graphs part of the quadratic because it stops at 2. So that's what piecewise functions do. They graph a piece of the full linear or quadratic or exponential or whatever kind of graph it is. It graphs a piece of it because you're restricting the domain to be a certain amount of the x-axis. So let's see, how is it that we evaluate these? Because if you can evaluate them, then we'll be able to plot points and actually graph them. So first we're going to evaluate these piecewise functions from the graph. So f of -6 means go over to -6 on the x-axis. Now this graph happens to go by 2's, so 2, 4, -6 is here. Okay, so with this -6 that I've marked off here, you can see that I would have to go up to, well, my marker's not working, hold on. I would have to go up to this flat line to find the value of y because there's no graph below -6. And that graph is on 6 because it's going by 2's again. Now if I want to graph 4, 2, 4 is here, I would go up and hit the graph, and that's one line above 10, so that will be 12. So that's all you're doing, is just looking up the y value for each of these x's that they've given you. So at 0, I'm on the origin, and so that would make it 0. At -2, here's -2. Let me do that in a different color. Here's -2. So do I go up and hit that point, or do I go down and hit the other one? Well, you want it to be colored in, so you want the one that's below it and touching the straight line, and that would be at -6. And then f of -5, well, -5 is not exactly on here, but -5 would be halfway in the middle between -4 and -6. And so therefore it would be 6, because remember we're going by 2's, so it's up 3 lines, would be by 2's, would be 6. So you're just picking off the y value for each one. And if there's an open and a closed circle, you want to pick the closed circle because that's where your function is defined. So now stop the video and do these questions, and then when you restart the video you can check to see how you did. Okay, so -4, again this is going by 2's, so -4 would come down to here, and that's 2 lines below -10, so that's -14. For 4 you'd go over 2 lines, and that looks like that. No, actually it looks like it's the one below that, -12. Not quite on it right there. Looks like it's better right there. And sometimes that's hard to tell with these problems, so do the best you can if it looks a little off to you. So at 0 you go over to the center and up to the top of the quadratic, and that would be 4. On -2 there are 2 open and a closed circle, so we're going to pick the closed circle and get -6. And then at -5 we're going to get -20. because negative 5 is halfway between these two, and that goes right down to the negative 20. So the only one that seemed to be a little bit iffy was number 7. And again, if you're not sure, now that I look at that, I think it really looks more like negative 14. All right, so that's how you look at a graph and choose what the function is evaluated at. Now we're going to look at it with equations. So here I have two equations, and I'm going to work with you on 1 through 5, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to stop and do 6 through 10. So again, this is your domain. So you choose your question by which domain it fits in. For example, negative 6 is less than negative 3. So you want to use the second equation because this equation says less than negative 3. And so you'll do negative 2 times negative 6 minus 9 because that's the formula that it fits in the domain with. That'll be 12 minus 9, which is 3. When you choose 0, 0 is bigger than negative 3, so you would choose the first formula. 1/3 times 0 plus 5, because 0 is greater than negative 3 in the domain. So you're just picking on which side of negative 3 you're on, so you'll know whether to choose the less than or the greater than equation. And that comes out to be 5 because 0 times anything drops off. 2 is bigger than negative 3, so again we're going to be using the first equation. Now this one's not quite as nice because 2 times 1/3, if you stick a 1 under the 2, becomes 2/3. Plus 5 is 2 and thirds, plus 5 is going to be 5 2/3. You need an improper fraction. You remember you multiply the whole number times the denominator, that'll give you 15, plus the numerator will give you 17/3. If you're not sure about that, you could always type in the calculator and go math frac. But when it's negative 3, you're not below or above it, so you're equal to it. So you want to choose the one that has the equal to line in it, which again is the first one. And you can multiply that out. If you multiply this out, you'll get negative 3 over negative 3, which is negative 1, plus 5, which is 4. So multiplying fractions is not hard. You just multiply the tops together and you multiply the bottoms together. And then the last one, negative 4, if you plug that in, you're looking negative 4 is less than negative 3, so you want the second equation. You plug in your negative 4. That'll give you 8 minus 9 is negative 1. So now I want you to stop the video. I want you to work out 6 through 10. I want you to choose which formula do you plug it in. Do you plug it in x is less than or equal to 2 or x is greater than 2 so that you can see if you can get these on your own. And once you have finished working all these, come back, turn the video on, and check your work. So now we're back, and let's see where these fall. Now again, we're comparing, is it less than 2 or greater than 2 for most of these questions. So negative 3 is less than 2, so you would use the first formula, and that would come out negative 6. 0 is also less than 2, so you would use that first formula again and get 0. But 3 is greater than 2, so you would plug it into the quadratic. 3 minus 3 is 0, squared is 0, times the negative is 0, plus 6 is 6. So anytime something comes out 0, that whole part of the problem's gone. Negative 1 is less than 2, so you plug that in the first one and get negative 2. And then again, when it's equal to, you've got to make sure you choose the formula that has the equal to mark. Since the number is 2, it's equal in the first one, so I will multiply that out and get 4. Now this problem set could have been just a little bit more difficult if I had chosen more numbers bigger than 2, because I'd have had to do a little bit more math. So the last thing we're going to look at is what we call compositions. And these aren't the most difficult compositions compared to what we could be working. But I have 3 formulas at the top. The first 2 are the same as the previous slide. I just added a third one, H, so we could have a variety of formulas. And as you go through these, you're going to notice that you have to do quite a few calculations. For example, in number 11, 2 times f of negative 4 minus 4 times g of 0, you actually have to calculate f of negative 4. You need that to put it in here because you're going to have to say 2 times that answer minus 4 times the answer of g of 0. So let's calculate f of negative 4. Now, negative 4 fits in the second equation because it's less than negative 3. And again, negative 2 times negative 4 minus 9 comes out to be negative 1. We just worked that problem on the previous page. Then g of 0, you look at the g function, 0 is less than 2, so we'll put it in the first formula, and that comes out 0. So now we take these two answers, and we actually fill them in the problem that we're wanting to work. Since anything times 0 drops off, the answer to this question is negative 2. Let's do another one. So h of 8 and f of 4 are the two problems we need to work. Because in order to work out the problem the way they're wanting us to, we're going to do negative 3 times the first answer plus the second answer. So we've got to go work out those answers. And that way we'll be able to get the answers filled in and worked out for the main expression. So h of 8 would mean 8 is greater than 6, because in the h formula you're on one side or the other is 6. So that means negative times 8 minus 1 is negative 9. But 4 gets worked out in the first equation, so 1/3 times 4 plus 5 for the f function, because 4 is bigger than negative 3. And that comes out to be 4/3 plus 5. So I would need a common denominator. 4/3 plus 15/3 would be 5, because you multiply the top and the bottom by 3 to change the denominator to 3. And that makes 19/3. So then after you do that, you would take, well, hold on. Move that over. To work this question, you would multiply negative 3 times negative 9 is 27, plus 19/3. Now, if you had 19/3 as a mixed number, it'd be easier to add, because this is 6 1/3 plus 27, which is 33 1/3. And if you go 33 times 3 is 99 plus 1 is 100 over 3, you'd have your final answer. You'll notice I'm working all of these without a calculator, because these are skills that you need to have. You need to be able to work math out no matter what kind of numbers you have. And fractions seem to be what you're scared the most of in school. So I'm working these fraction problems to try to reiterate what you're supposed to know about fractions. All right, let's do one more together, and then you can try 14 and 15 on your own. So g of negative 1 tells me that I need to use the function where negative 1 is less than 2. So that's 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Then h of negative 2, when I look at that function, I'll use the less than 6. So that's 1/2 times negative 2 minus 10. And that's negative 1 minus 10, which is negative 11. Now we fill in our formula. We're going to do 4 times the first answer, negative 2, plus 2 times the second answer, which was negative 11. So that's negative 8 minus 22, or negative 30. So now stop the video, work out 14, 15 on your own, and then come back and turn the video on and check your work. Alright, so now you're back, and I've got to move these over a little bit so I can reach them on the board and be able to have enough room to work them. So let's first start with negative 3 and f. Negative 3 and f has the equal to mark here, so that would mean that I'm going to be plugging it in the first equation. So 1/3 times negative 3 plus 5. That cancels out the 3's and makes negative 1 plus 5 is 4. Then for g of 3, and the g function 3 is greater than 2, so you're going to be plugging it in the second equation. And I believe we worked this one earlier when we put in 3 and got 6. So negative 2 times 4 minus 4 times 6. That's going to be negative 8 minus 24, which is negative 32. All right, for our second one, h of 6, well, 6 is equal to 6 for the first equation, so 1/2 times 6 minus 10, that's going to be 3 minus 10, which is 7. So I'm going to have 3 times 7 to get started. Then when I do g of 2, 2 is equal to 2 on the first equation, so 2 times 2 is 4. I fill that in. This is 21 minus 8. That comes out to be 13. So there's a worksheet in Canvas, or if you have been sent home the assignment, you can now do your lesson on 2.1.